Imagine a skill college freshmen could build that solves every single challenge. A skill which gets at the root issue of a problem you're facing so that it doesn't come back again. Something that could help you level up your journaling to build your emotional intelligence, your self understanding, and purpose. To study and learn more effectively in school and personal passions. To strategize for a purposeful and profitable career in the age of AI. To build intrinsic motivation and self regulation. To grow conscious relationships and to get better grades. That skill is the skill of going meta. And it's this skill that can help with what this channel is really about, pursuing spirituality. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Why am I telling you this first off, and what is going meta? Well, I have been, over the last 6 years, creating hundreds, now I think 700 plus pieces of content on YouTube, my newsletter, and my podcast, partially centered around this notion of going meta. I've talked to an audience of 10,000 plus through 6 self-made courses and taught hundreds of college students and adults. I've worked for the #1 gamification company, currently working for them, the Octalysis Group, where we go meta on motivation to understand how we can make more engaging and enjoyable experiences through leveraging the principles of video game design and integrating them into real life. And I've made 3 of my own meta theories. Those are spiral knowing, the truth compass, and the meta hexagon. So going meta is a topic which I'm really passionate about. And now we can dive into, well, what the heck does going meta even mean? It's actually really simple. It means stepping out from the frames that you're using to relate to reality, becoming self-aware, self-referential, self-creating. It could mean becoming aware of how the information sources that you're consuming are making you relate to college. It could be becoming aware of how the food that you're eating physically is making you feel and how that affects the rest of your life, whether socially or emotionally or mentally. It could be whether evaluating college is really about getting good grades and a profitable career, or learning deeply, finding truth. It could be me breaking the fourth wall of this video by telling you that you're watching a video. Or in a sense that I would particularly love, it could be a book character like Kaladin Stormblessed in the Stormlight Archives, breaking the fourth wall by explicitly talking about how you're reading the Stormlight Archives. This is all examples of going meta, which then begs the question, why is going meta valuable? Well, it's a little funny because going meta is a skill that improves literally everything in the long term. And that's because when you go meta, you think about the process of doing something rather than just the end result. The process of studying in order to get better grades. The process of talking to friends in order to be more charismatic. The process of emotional regulation through journaling in order to navigate your emotions better. So going meta improves your ability to do everything in the long term. But a little more specifically, it particularly helps you with 3 things, which are firstly, your emotional intelligence. It helps you see all the various parts that are impacting your life and how you can integrate them together. We're all made of a cluster heck of parts which are trying to help us in their own ways. Personally, I have parts like Aurelius, Groovy, and Mr. Career, which all have different motivations, emotions, and they're trying to help me. The problem is when these parts are conflicting, which is what most of us, unfortunately, in college are experiencing. So our goal with going meta is to identify not only the parts in our lives, but help integrate them together so that they're no longer in conflict, but building towards a shared aspiration. It also helps you develop your self-understanding. By self-understanding, I mean literally self-understanding. What are the emotional tendencies that you have, the thinking patterns, the behavior patterns? Why are you following these patterns? How are they affecting you across all of your different college life constellations, including your health, your mental faculties, your emotional faculties, your social, everything? And then how can we navigate your shadow with that in mind? I have a video first off on emotional regulation, emotional intelligence up above. I think it's called Stop Letting Emotions Run Your College Life for emotional intelligence. And then for shadow work, I have a whole ultimate shadow work journaling guide that you can check out as well for college freshmen. And then finally, it helps you develop your purpose, which some students I talk to say they don't need to do at this point in their life because they're like, Aiden, that's why I'm in college. It's to navigate and figure out what my purpose is. So I don't need to work on that actively right now. I'm just going to be in college. And I totally get it. I was the same when I came into college. The problem is that if you don't define your purpose consciously, then you will spend your whole college time living someone else's. It's crucial that you have some sense of what to find relevant throughout your life, which is what a purpose does. It filters for relevant information in a way that is conscious for what you want, not what someone else wants. So even if you don't know what your purpose is right now, your purpose can be figuring out what your purpose is just in a little bit more of a conscious sense than kind of just sitting around and waiting for it to come. Because it will come eventually, but it won't necessarily come as fast as if you were actively looking out for it. And if that's something you want to do more in depth, I created a whole free cosmic journaling kit, which is a gamified journaling system that helps you grow exactly these things with over 1,000 journaling questions in just 15 minutes a day. So check that out in the description below if it sounds interesting. But with that being said, let's talk a little bit more about going meta and how powerful of a skill that is. So we've discussed what it is, why it's so powerful, but now let me give you 6 ways to go meta by introducing my own meta theory, the meta hexagon. So the meta hexagon is something that helps you, I'll flash it up on screen right now, in 6 different ways think about going meta by looking at the frames through which you relate to reality. A frame is the lens through which you as an individual or a culture as a whole senses, perceives, feels, thinks, and acts and relates to reality. So I'll give examples later on, but the meta hexagon helps scaffold how to go meta on frames in 3 different stages: uniframe, multiframe, and transcending frame. Uniframe, get this, it's incredible naming. It looks at one frame. And you can define a frame, reflect on a frame, or evaluate a frame in uniframe. That's stage 1. Then we have stage 2, which is multi-frame. This is where you compare frames, you change frames. And then in stage 3, transcending frames, you create your own frame. Don't worry, we're going to get into what all of these are, and you don't have to remember them all. So stage progression is generally you want to go deeper and deeper into the stages, starting with stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. But it's not always going to be that way. It's just that generally it's more complex to go down the frames because, you're handling multiple frames at a time. The cool thing about the meta hexagon is that you can change the bar's values relative to each other to create your own meta hexagon breakdown and help you understand how you're relating to a specific context. So, for example, maybe in studying in particular, you don't go meta that much. You just go uniframe and define a frame, but you don't really reflect on the frame or evaluate the frame or do anything below that. The meta-hexagon breakdown can help you see that and then make active efforts to be more meta in that area of your life. Now, how do you tell the relative distance of the bars? Well, there's many factors that you can think of, but I think the three most important that I think about when going meta is, firstly, what is the way you relate to the world? Do you relate to the world in more of a defining a frame way or more of an evaluating or more of a creating in that context? How much time do you spend in each of those frames? And then finally, where's your behavior at? What are you actually doing related to each of those frames throughout your day? So, with that being said, let's dive a little bit more into each of these types, the 6 types of going meta, so that you can start leveraging the power of going meta yourself. So, firstly, defining a frame. This is stage 1, uniframe, the first step of going meta. Defining a frame means becoming conscious of a current frame. This is the what. Good metaphor you can think of is it's like taking off glasses that you're wearing and defining the material that they're made out of. So, for example, you could define the thought loops you experience on a daily basis and what context they show in, as well as the internal or external triggers that lead to those thought loops occurring. So, for example, I noticed myself when I was a freshman, if I entered the student libraries on a weekend, I would have a thought loop of like, Aiden, what are you doing? You have to work more. You know, you're at Cornell. You got to become like Superman when it comes to studying. And how could you be so lazy? That was a thought loop I would experience often. Then we have another defining your frame example. It could be what your life purpose is. So when I first came to college, it was way different than what it is now. I wanted to be a human biology, health, and society major. Say that 10 times fast. Because I wanted to fight the obesity crisis. I had this whole era of dieting that didn't go so well, and I didn't want anyone else to have to deal with that. Then you could define your shared culture / values of a friend group using the defining a frame. So for me, my shared values / culture of my first freshman friend group was like having fun together, procrastinating together, but in a fun way, movie, adventure, exercise, a bit of complaining culture as well, just about how much homework there was and stuff, and also humorous. So that's defining a frame. Now let's take all those 3 examples and let's move to the next step of going meta, which is reflecting on a frame. This is asking how a frame affects you and why it affects you that way. So it's the how and the why, whereas the defining a frame was the what. This is like reflecting on how glasses came to be on your head after taking them off, how they make you see the world differently, and why. So for reflecting on thought loops, how does it affect me? Well, when I would enter the library on a weekend, I'd see all the students working. It would put me in a productivity mindset, a doing mindset. I was like, I can't just be on the weekend. I can't just relax. I have to be doing like these other students. I played so many video games as a kid, and I didn't want to fall into that same trap as a Cornell student. And then when reflecting on life purpose, it makes me work hard for classes, and also motivated my project for health self-improvement on others, which was a problem because I would come to everyone else and I would like project my own self-improvement health needs onto them and say like, oh, you have to eat healthier, you have to exercise more. I did it more gracefully than that, but it was a problem because I didn't take into account their needs, their growth trajectory, and what they were going through. And that purpose came from my period of dieting before coming to college and really wanting to help people not have to go through that. as well. Then the reflecting on shared culture slash values of friends, it makes me want to exercise more and watch more movies with my friends, but also, unfortunately, not talk much about substance, right? Not philosophy or anything like what I'm discussing right now. We would never have talked about this in my freshman friend group. And I think one of the reasons that I was so attached to this friend group, reflecting on it, was because I grew up in a hometown where I didn't have much new friends. I had the same friends for most of high school and middle school, so I didn't have to build social skills. And then when I came to college, I was like, well, crap, I got to make sure that I find a friend group that fits with me. Otherwise, I'm going to be a lonely little shark and very sad. So I found friends that I didn't necessarily resonate as much with. And with that being said, that's a good lead into the next step of the metahexagon, which is the last step in stage 1, uniframe, and that's evaluating a frame. This is judging or supporting a frame using some value, principle, goal, or purpose. So it's like if you took off your glasses and you evaluated the quality of the glass material, and are they the correct prescription for you? So for thought loops, as well as it got me to do things when I entered the student library, it definitely did not help me be in a being mode and just relax a little throughout the day, which was a downside and is something that I value much more now because of how not only meaningful it is to attain true success, happiness, and love, but also we are human beings at the end of the day, not human doings. And that thought loop, while it was good for the season of life that I was in, it ended up inhibiting me for quite a while and actually making it harder relationship wise to just be. Then in terms of life purpose, I think I hit a little bit on it in the reflecting section, but it really was toxic in some ways. I projected my health, self-improvement needs onto others without necessarily putting myself in their shoes and understanding if that was the right thing for them at the time. And it ended up hiding me from my true life purpose, the thing I really wanted to do, which is help transform college to be more conscious, knowledgeable, and loving by talking to college freshmen and any college student. So that's life purpose wise. And then as for values and culture and friends, yes, it was very nice having that good, humorous, procrastinating, and sometimes complaining culture, but they just didn't have the same values as me. I was someone who really prioritized growth, improvement, and still do, just in a different sense. For self-improvement back then, and now it's self-actualization, self-transcendence, and spirituality. So they were good for me at the beginning of college, a good foundation, but I ended up feeling lonely even in that friend group as time went on. So that's stage 1, uniframe. And that was already profound. So just imagine now as we go to stage 2, multiframe, how insane this gets. So in stage 2, multiframe, we start looking at multiple frames at a time. And the first part of that is comparing frames, which is comparing and evaluating 2+ frames, which is kind of like taking off glasses and then looking at 2 different glasses by their materials, the histories of how they came to be, how they affect you prescription-wise, and if they're good for you or not. So for thought loops, this is making me restless, sad, and disappointed throughout other parts of the day, especially when I see my content on YouTube underperform back then because I was in a very doing mode. I was in a very external mode of thinking. And that would affect me throughout the day outside of the library, which is an emphasis that I want to give on why going meta is so powerful, is it helps you see how holistically your life is impacted by everything. It's all connected together into this web matrix. And this actually almost lost me my first girlfriend because I was so productivity focused and she was more being oriented that I wouldn't spend as much time with her as I should. And I wouldn't be as attentive as I should have been when I was with her. And that experience helped me learn why being was so important. Then life purpose wise, it made me eat too little, chronically tired and hungry, and not as motivated for classes as I could be. Now you might say, Eden, why would your life purpose to fight obesity make you do that? Well, the reason is that it was actually a toxic life purpose hiding me from the realization of how my own health habits were hurting me. I had this life purpose because of my own health habits, and by being so oriented around doing it and fighting obesity, it was almost like a smog to hide my own bad health habits at the time. And only once I unveiled that did I realize that this wasn't what I really wanted to do. And I was able to become more healthy in my habits towards life, which we'll get to in the changing a frame section. Then we have values and culture and friends. Well, they were making me feel lonely and isolated and caused me to radicalize doing content creation instead of schoolwork. Because I felt so lonely in school, I went more into content creation because it was the place where I really felt alive, like me. And partially because of being in that friend group, I was like, okay, well, school isn't working out. So I just oriented more into content creation. I did the part-time YouTuber Academy. I created 1 to 2 videos a week. I got a YouTube editor and an uploader, which is all things I probably wouldn't have done as actively unless I had that friend group that was making me feel isolated in that way. So that's comparing frames. Now we have changing frames, the next level of that, which is changing a frame by redesigning an old frame or experimenting with a new one. So this is like putting on a different pair of glasses or changing the materials of an old pair. So for thought loops, I adopted the frame of just being for the sake of being sometimes. I call this conscious relaxation, which I also have a video on up above that you should check. Why is it so hard to relax in college, I think is what it's called. I did this through sometimes playing video games with my friend John, watching movies on my own, walking for very long amounts of time, and a bunch of other stuff. As for life purpose, I switched to a human development major instead of human biology, health, and society. My content ebbed more into self-actualization and spirituality and meta-learning and gamification instead of the health content that I was making beforehand. And I started creating videos like this towards college students. As for my values in my friend group, I unfortunately did have to leave my old friend group because it was so painful for me. It just wasn't resonating. But I built friendships that were much more powerful and intimate and more resonant over the course of my 4 years at Cornell after that. And it was only because of realizing that I could do it. And then lastly, inside of the meta hexagon, we have stage 3, which is creating frames or transcending frames. And the one step inside of that is creating a frame, which is perhaps the most profound and most difficult of all the going meta. This is creating an entirely new frame on top of simply changing to one that already exists. This is making a new pair of glasses entirely. And I really mean completely making something new, not even like taking a whole bunch of other people's stuff and then making something that already kind of exists, but with your own little twist. That's sort of creating a frame, but I mean like something that genuinely isn't out there already. Like, for example, my videos on shadow work, journaling, emotional intelligence, conscious relaxation. There is some stuff out there, but the way that I talk about them and some of the principles that I discuss inside of them, at least I haven't seen anywhere else. And that's not some egoic, like, look at me, I'm so incredible. That comes from this meta thinking. You can do it too. In fact, I encourage you to create meta theories that are better than mine through watching this video. The meta hexagon is an example of creating a frame. This, I haven't seen any theories of going meta before this. It's kind of meta to create a theory of going meta, but I decided it needed to exist. Why does this not exist? It's such a powerful skill for college freshmen. And spiral knowing and my truth compass are also examples of creating an entirely new frame through which to interpret and relate to reality. So we've dived into the meta hexagon, the 3 stages and the 6 different steps inside of those, why meta is so important, and what going meta even means. If you liked this video and if you want to learn even more about going meta, this is actually a much shorter video of a longer video on this topic, which I made a few months back. I think it's called The Most Undervalued College Freshman Skill. So check out the longer video up above if you liked this one. And I encourage you to check out my College Freshman Cosmic Journaling Kit. It's free. It's a gamified journaling system with over 1,000 journaling questions to help you grow your emotional intelligence, your self-understanding, and your purpose, as well as learn how to go meta in just 15 minutes a day. So that's in the description below if that sounds good. It's been lovely. As always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Eat some peanut butter, and bye-bye.